All right, it looks like we've hit 1 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for being here this afternoon, and I welcome you to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspectives on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions for the period of February. And we had a lot happen in February, so I'll keep this short so we can get to all of the good stuff. So today we will have Stu Foster from the Kentucky Climate Center and State Climate Office of Kentucky, and Matt Dixon from the UK Ag Weather Center presenting for us. And they both have some really good information to share with you today. So with no further ado, we will go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Megan. I appreciate that. I don't know if it's good information or bad information, but it should be interesting anyway. We've had quite a month here. So again, we want to give thanks to all of the folks that helped to make this webinar possible, including the Midwest Drought Early Warning System there, part of NIDIS, and our many partners here across the state, including the University of Kentucky Ag Weather Center. This is being recorded today, so we'll certainly want to, I think, to make this available for folks and publicize a little bit, given, again, just how active this last month has been. And then our next webinar will be on April 1st, coming up here as soon as we flip the calendar over. This picture here is a shot from our Mesonet camera in, let's see, that's Clinton County, I believe. And just kind of highlight, it looks cold. There's snow, a little bit of snow on the ground and on the trees, and kind of reflects what conditions were like generally for the period that we're focusing on here today. Another reminder of our Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Report. I encourage you to download that if you have not, and help us out in terms of collecting impact reports on either dry conditions or very wet conditions like we've had recently. And just a heads up that we are planning, I say we, the Kentucky Division of Water and the Kentucky Climate Center, looking at organizing a drought preparedness meeting tentatively for April 6th and 13th. We'll have some more information out about it. It would be those two partial days via Zoom, and provide an overview of drought from a climatological perspective, take a look at drought risk issues and impacts and such, and then tools and resources that are available to you and to be able to analyze and try to better understand drought conditions in the state. So our outline for this month, we'll be looking at recent conditions, temperature, precip, soil moisture, stream flow. We had to add flooding in there as a prime topic this month, but we'll also talk about drought, not here in the state at the moment, but if we look at a bigger scale, it's something we still need to be paying attention to. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about impacts. We could have had an entire webinar on impacts over the last month, but kind of squeeze that in here and hit the highlights. And then we'll look forward and see what we expect to be coming our way here over the next few weeks, and then further out on a seasonal perspective. Then we'll summarize all of that and have an opportunity for questions and discussion. So on the left hand, there are a couple photographs. The one on the upper left is our Mesonet camera in Webster County, and that's February 15th, the day of one of our winter storms. So there's a little bit of snow in this image, but what I wanted to highlight was in the background, you see a lot of white, and that's the reservoir there in the city park at Dixon that is covered with ice. And so that's fairly unusual here in Kentucky, but it's a reflection of just how cold it was during the recent period. And then below that, we have a feature that you won't see on a map, Lake Woodbury over in Butler County, because normally that would be a field of soybeans or corn. And We've got a lot of water backed up there on the Green River, and that plays out across the state in our river basins. So taking a look at precipitation over the last 30 days, again, the raster images there are the National Weather Service radar estimated precipitation totals that have been calibrated based on station observations. And then the numbers there are from our Kentucky Mesonet sites across the state. You can see a swath that runs west-southwest to east-northeast of heavier precipitation, or higher totals, I should say, with the highest numbers there being 9 inches or more. Lincoln County, I think 9.65, and that represents mainly the effects of the recent storm here at the end of February. And then as you go out, you have lower amounts, but even in the areas that were quote unquote drier, you're still looking at amounts that were generally around 3.5, 4 inches or more across the state. So overall, pretty wet month for Kentucky. And if we look out to the 60-day period, we see roughly the same pattern across the state. And again, that reflects just the magnitude of this recent precipitation event that we experienced, with most of that rainfall, again, occurring on February 28th, this past Sunday. And our 60-day totals then are ranging up into the 12 to close to 13-inch totals in some areas. And the drier parts of the state over that 60-day period still receiving generally about 6 inches or more in most areas. And finally, if we look out to the 90-day period to really look at long-term wetness or dryness across the state, you see that same general pattern running across the state. Those precipitation totals now for 90 days reaching up to 16, 17. I think Lincoln County there is over 18 inches of precipitation. And back in Taylor County, the number's hard to read there, but I think we're looking at 18 or 19 inches. So those are the highest totals. And then we drop off to areas that have received about half that total. So we have some areas generally along the Ohio River that are very close to 10 inches plus or minus. And in the far southeastern part of the state, the amounts are a little bit higher down there, generally 13, 14 inches or more. But again, pretty widespread and abundant precipitation over that 90-day period. So if we compare that to what would be normal, here we're looking again at the precipitation as a percent of what's normal. And normal is based on a 30-year period, 1981 to 2010. Those numbers are going to get adjusted, and they're going to get adjusted upward fairly significantly this year when the new climate normals come out. But we're looking at the 30, 60, and 90-day percent of normal precipitation. You see the same patterns there on the map. The colors are the key thing here, and the darker shaded blue, the purple tone, is an area that received over the last 30 days in the upper left between 200 and 300% of normal precipitation. And then the area in the lighter blue and the darker green, all of those areas are at least 150% of normal. So that's a pretty good coverage over the state on the last 30 days. And also, if you look out over the last 60 days, you see a good bit of the state, especially with an eastern bias in it, that has been well above normal precipitation-wise. It also shows up in the 90-day map. Again, the fact that that same pattern is showing up in all those maps is really an indication of how much that recent precipitation event that comes into the last 30 days has impacted the picture for the 60 and 90-day periods too. So it was just a very significant event that we experienced. Now, when you look at the 30 or 60 and 90-day totals in particular, You see a little bit of indication of some longer term areas where there has been some dryness, not major dryness, but we're either near or a little bit below normal precipitation. And again, once you start looking at that over a longer period, it becomes a little more meaningful in general. Having said that, we've been in the cool season of the year, so even there it's not particularly critical, but we are paying attention to it. Temperature-wise, the 30-day period from February 3rd to March 2nd was well below normal in terms of average temperatures, both the average daily maximum temperatures and the average daily minimum temperatures. And the gradient is broadly from west to east. You can see on the left there that our average maximum temperatures in the Jackson Purchase area in lower Ohio Basin were generally 9 to 10 or even 11 degrees colder than normal for this period. And we had that, again, outbreak of Arctic air, so-called polar vortex, that really sat in place for quite a while there across the central portion of the continent. Obviously, the state of Texas was impacted quite a bit and was in the news for those impacts there. But it was particularly cold here in Kentucky too. And again, you see the same pattern generally with the low temperatures, although they were a little bit warmer relative to normal than the high temperatures were. Soil moisture, on the left side, you can see the calculated soil moisture percentile ranking for March 3rd. So that's a pretty current number there that has a lot of green across Kentucky. And on the right-hand side, you see, again, remote sensing product looking at shallow groundwater, similar to looking at soil moisture. Not as much dark blue, not indicating as much wetness, but again, that's on March 1st, may not have fully captured the effects of the recent precipitation event. And soil moisture, initially I was going to I thought about leaving these out this month with the notion that, gee, it's rained a whole lot, there's no issues with soil moisture, but I put them in, put in the graphs to highlight really not concern of drought, but the notion that we have quite a bit of soil moisture out there, in some cases very much saturated soils almost. And so it makes us more vulnerable for the types of events that we just had, where we have a heavy rainfall event and there's a very high percentage of that water that runs off because it cannot infiltrate into the soil column. So here we're looking at some stations that we had last month, but we also have some new ones. So in the upper left, we're looking at Crittenden County down the lower Ohio River basin. And in the lower left, I swapped out Trigg County and put in Todd County there. And again, you can see the soil moisture levels at different depths. Certainly the shallower depths have peaked up here over the last few days. The 2-inch depth that spiked there with the heavy precipitation and is, of course, already starting to fall back down there. In the upper right, Madison County, again, that was sort of in the path with a lot of the heavy precipitation. And you can see there's been a general increase in soil moisture through the cool season of the year, which is not unusual by any means. And in the lower right, I think this is the first time we put Cumberland County in there down along the southern border. But that station's located down in a valley near a stream there. So again, reflects an area where we would have very wet soils at this point. Seven-day average stream flow. Got a lot of black in there, particularly in the eastern half. The Kentucky River Basin in particular was impacted in terms of flooding and such, and very high stream flows. And you also see some black over on the Big Sandy Basin, and then down here on the in the Green River, Barren River area in Bowling Green. and such. And then otherwise, generally much above normal. So much above normal to high stream flows across most of the state, not to anybody's surprise at this point. And the 28-day averages show generally a similar pattern where we have higher stream flows in the eastern part of the state. And again, the Kentucky River standing out there in terms of much above to high categories in some cases, and elsewhere across the state, a tendency to be above normal more so than in the normal category in most areas. And again, that reflects not just the recent precipitation event with heavy rainfall, but we also had the snowfall events and melting and such of that snowfall. So current map of current flooding across the state. This is usually mainly a green map, but we've got a multicolored map with a few red dots in there across Kentucky that indicate moderate flooding. We're now a few days past the precipitation event, so the flooding has moved downstream, and some of the upstream locations that were devastated with high water during the event, now that water has receded and there are flooding concerns farther downstream. So if we go to the next slide, I've highlighted a few well, no, I guess I've got those coming a little bit later. Here we've got a map from the Kentucky Mesonet of our precipitation totals for the 3-day period, February 26th to 28th. In general, there was, again, it varied depending on where you were in the state, but on Friday the 26th, there was precipitation, fairly light amounts, less than ½ an inch typically in places that received precipitation. And then on Saturday, there was a little bit more, maybe more like an inch or somewhere in that neighborhood. But it was the 28th where we really received the heavy amounts that represented 75 to 80% or more of the totals there. But you can see again that swath across the state, the heaviest total there in northern Warren County at 7.01 inches. But again, a number of stations there at 6 inches or more. And the thing that this does not capture with the map was the rainfall rates. So in addition to the heavy precipitation on generally near saturated soils after snow melt and such, with the heaviness of those cells and the rapid rainfall, that contributed to flooding in places like Callaway County down in the western portion there, where they had the 5.64 inches. And put in a couple slides here. This is from our Mesonet camera in Lewis County up along the Ohio River. And again, this is a station that's located in a valley. We do have some of our stations that are in areas that are prone to flooding and are at risk for flooding. And we found that out again with this event. But those stations, while they can be at risk for flooding, are very important in terms of capturing temperatures and weather in low-lying areas where most Kentuckians live in the eastern half of the state. So the key thing here, if you take a look at those images, they're taken at 30-minute intervals. And you can see across the top row, there's really not a whole lot of change. That's 1400 is 2 o'clock UTC time, which would have been 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So from 9 a.m. To 10:30, there's really not much change. But then in the bottom row, you can see how rapidly the water rose in that basin there in Lewis County. Again, heavy precipitation on already wet soils, and that water coming off the hillsides and collecting there in the valley. And that played out again across many areas of eastern Kentucky. The fortunate thing here is that's a field. There are no houses, no buildings and such to be impacted there. And this next set of images are taken from our mesonet camera here in Bowling Green at the Western Kentucky University Farm. And that you can see here on the 28th, again, there were bands of rain that came through, and it's evident here on the left that we have a heavy band that's getting ready, approaching. And if you look in that image, sort of in the background, you might be able to see a little bit of water standing just to the left of that clump of trees in the center of the image. But on the right side, that's just half an hour later, but after that precipitation came, you can see basically a lake of water that has ponded in the background behind the tree clump there in the center of the image. So all of that just within a half an hour has filled up with water that has run off of relatively flat ground from that precipitation event. And that's important because it reflects what was happening in the western half of the state. So you can have flooding and flash flooding even in terrain that is relatively flat here in Kentucky. So while eastern Kentucky received a lot of the attention and rightfully so, perhaps, but the concerns with flooding and the impacts of that were very widespread across the state, even in areas where you normally would not think of it as being a high risk. Okay, these are the slides that I was thinking of a moment ago. With the current flood conditions, we selected off some hydrographs from stream gauges on the Kentucky River. And you're going from, at the lower right, you're closer to the headwaters. So that's in the lower right, the North Fork of the Kentucky River at Hazard, Kentucky. And you can see there that the dark or the kind of bright royal blue curve there shows the stream stage at the beginning there, 10 o'clock in the morning on Monday. It was in moderate flood or minor flood stage. And then it has since receded back down to closer to a baseline flow of just over 6 feet compared to being nearly 25 feet. And in the lower left, go to the North Fork of the Kentucky River at Jackson. So we're a little bit farther downstream, and you can see there they hit moderate flooding Monday morning. Again, it has receded back down now from about 40 feet stage to about 8.5 feet. And then in the upper right, the Kentucky River at Camp Nelson is still currently in major flood category at stage of about 42 feet, but it has just peaked, crested, and is starting to trend downward by forecast. And then farther downstream at Frankfort in the upper left, you can see that water has still been rising, but it is nearing the expected crest at right around 40 feet, right at the edge of major flooding, but should be expected to start receding sometime around late Friday or Saturday morning. So again, the Kentucky River heavily affected by the precipitation, and again, you've probably seen some of the images of damage to some of the communities there along the Kentucky River. This set of hydrographs is on the Ohio River. And again, at the bottom right, we're going upstream, and that's at Ashland. And you can see that the Ohio River reached moderate flood stage at about 58 feet, but it is now receding, still in minor flood stage. To the left of that at Maysville, it has reached minor flood stage and has crested and should start to recede here, going forward. And then farther downstream in the upper right is McAlpin, upper McAlpin gauge there in Louisville, where water is still rising. It's in minor flood stage now at about 27 feet, expected to reach near 30 feet, just under the moderate flooding category before it starts to recede sometime late Saturday, early Sunday. And then finally, we go downstream to Paducah, near the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi. And we have flood stage in a minor category, about 42 feet, expected to remain at that level for some time here until Sunday, and then start to decline, to drop at that point. So again, the flooding moving downstream, fortunately on the Ohio larger stream, flooding is not as significant, but certainly we have a lot of population centers located along that river. So now moving in a different direction and talking about drought. When you look at Kentucky, of course, there's nothing to see here in the state. We had earlier been in and out of the D0 category a little bit, but we're clearly out of that at this point. But we do, again, need to take note that there is a very good coverage of drought conditions to our western half of the United States, the upper Great Plains, and in parts of the Midwest, a little closer to us in Illinois and Indiana, there's some dryness there, and even a little bit of moderate drought. I've been on some calls here the last couple days with some of my counterparts, state climatologists and some extension folks and National Weather Service people in the Great Plains and Midwest, and there's concern there about the possibility for drought expanding here as we get into the warm season. That's generally been a poor year in terms of snowpack, so there's not a lot of moisture available there, and just a concern that if, depending on how conditions develop, things could dry out fairly quickly. Again, it's not a forecast at this point. It's not a warning in any sense. It's just an acknowledgement that they are in a position where they would be more vulnerable to the development of dry conditions at this point. And so, again, we want to pay attention to that too, because if conditions get dry to our west and south, then a dry soil condition can affect our weather here too by reducing the amount of moisture that advects into the Ohio River Basin and into Kentucky, and potentially can contribute to lower precipitation totals and warmer temperatures going forward. But again, it's not a forecast at this time, just something that we are paying attention to. Change over the last month in terms of the drought monitor. Not a whole lot of change all in all. There's some areas that have improved by a category in the green shading, and there are some areas that have decreased by a category in the light yellow shading. That's the main thing there. Most areas have not changed. Again, we're in the winter months. That's not to be unexpected. We've seen some improvement if we look close to us down in Tennessee to our south. So that's a positive indication for us there. Now, in terms of impacts, we've got a really busy map. We had a few months where there wasn't much on there. And again, I highlighted earlier that we really could have an entire webinar focusing on the impacts of the recent weather, but we don't have the option to do that here. So really try to capture some of the high points there, and really just 3 bullets. One, that we've had multiple snowstorms in the first half of the month, some of them affecting just portions of the state. The most recent one there on the 15th, 16th was very widespread across the state. And we had, in addition to the snow, which disrupted transportation and led to closures, we had freezing rain, ice buildup, accumulation, sleet and such. So just a mix of nasty winter weather. In general, the ice accumulation was less than half an inch. There may have been a couple places where it, hit that mark or was just a little bit above, but more typically it was somewhere around a quarter of an inch or so. And, there was concern going into that we could be looking at a major ice storm, such as we had, I think it was 2009, and a little bit more than a decade ago, where we had areas that were without power for about a month or so. We fortunately avoided that situation. We did have power outages. There were some fatalities associated with the ice, a couple traffic accidents that led to fatalities, and another death that appeared to be related to hypothermia that resulted from a power outage. So there were some impacts there. And then the heavy rainfall event that we had recently with the widespread aerial flooding of our rivers, but also flash flooding that did a lot of property damage, impacted our transportation infrastructure, and we'll be cleaning up for that for quite a while. There was one confirmed tornado, at least from that event there across the southern portion of the state. I know National Weather Service from Louisville was down in Clinton County doing a storm survey there just a couple days ago. So, but a fairly minor tornado with rather minor damage, but it was part of this system. So I think I've got another, go ahead. One more slide there that kind of captures a little bit of that winter weather. The image there on the left from Boone County. The northern part of the state had some heavy snowfall there on the 9th of February that most parts of the state did not receive. And then we had the storms there on the, from the 10th, 11th, 12th, 15th, 16th. On the upper left is one of our mesonet stations in Lincoln County. And the station has a guy wire that runs down, and you can see the ice accumulation that has built up on that guy wire there. And then in the lower left, that's Fulton County over on the Mississippi River. It's not as common to get snowfall in that area. And then below that, on the right side is our station in Marshall County, and again, showing snow accumulating there. So with that, well, Megan, I'll send it back to you, and I'll let you shoot it up the road to Matt.
All right, thanks. We are going to send it over to Matt Dixon with the UK Ag Weather Center.
All right. Thanks, guys, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm seeing sun here in Lexington. It's definitely a welcome sight to see after this past month, I'll say that. First off, and just to go along with what Stu has been saying throughout the webinar, ag was looking good through December and January, but then came February. So total of 4 extreme weather events definitely took a toll on Kentucky ag, especially eastern Kentucky, where they saw 2 ice storms, a heavy snowfall event, and then the significant flooding shortly thereafter. But fortunately, we aren't in the growing season, but that's not to say agriculture didn't see any impact. So just to start off, at this point in the year, we only have monthly crop reports coming out from USDA NASS. Those weekly reports will start coming out in April. But based on the latest February report, I put some of the stats on this slide. The winter weather has been a detriment to livestock, with some reported losses in early season calving and livestock condition taking a step back. Cold stress was a major concern during the winter weather events earlier, or about a month ago, especially those areas that saw freezing rain. But at this point, livestock condition is now rated as 3% very poor, 4% poor, 24% fair, 61% good, and 8% excellent. These numbers, they're not terrible, But once again, we have taken a step back from January numbers. Just in one example, livestock condition was rated 71% in the good category in January and has decreased, as you can see, 61% in that category this month. So pastures will take a hit with all this rain and the muddy conditions to follow. Cattle will require more energy just to walk around through all that mud. The good news is hay reserves are still sufficient for the most part, with 80% reporting adequate reserves. So saying that, this report did come out on February 24th, before the major flooding we saw at the end of the month. I have seen some reports of livestock lost to flooding. I've seen some video of barns full of hay just swamped with floodwaters. It will take some time to really determine the extent of damage to Kentucky ag. But in the end, this was a major flooding event, as Stu was showing earlier. Some portions of Kentucky saw twice the average February precip in a span of 2 days. So a lot of rainfall. So lastly, on this slide, there was some concern in relation to the wheat crop, as we saw temperatures dip into the single digits and even below zero at times towards the middle of February. Saying that, UK Extension agronomist Carrie Knott mentioned in a previous article, I got that web link down there underneath the pictures, but we were lucky to have a layer of ice and snow to insulate the crop, and it really should have been enough to protect the crop from major injury. So she did say to go ahead and scout for any damage with warmer temperatures in place. Once again, major damage is not expected, but we could see some what you call cosmetic damage to leaf or leaf tips. So you can see some of that cosmetic damage in the images she posted on the right, showing some yellowing of the leaves. So in the end, she explained this will not affect final grain yield, so just cosmetic damage. So as of the latest crop report, winter wheat conditions remain predominantly in the good category at 61% and 8% in the excellent category. So, Megan, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so just to close, this February was obviously on the cooler side. In previous webinars, I've been discussing this trend we've been seeing over the past 5 or 6 years with warm and wet conditions in place over the winter months. Stu can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe overall, looking at the months of December through February, that trend of warmer and wetter conditions will continue, it looks like, for winter of 2020, 2021. So saying that, February was very cool compared to past years. I was looking at the Midwestern Regional Climate Center today, and preliminary data for the month of February shows the state averaged 31.3 degrees for the month. We don't even come close to that number with the warm winters we've had in recent past. All other Februaries averaged 38 degrees or above since 2016, and again, we were closer to 31 this year. So you have to go back to the winter of 2015, the February that year, to find a colder February, and that was whenever we saw multiple instances where we went well below zero. So anyways, as much as we don't like the harsh cold and it can cause cold stress for animals across the state, I believe it will help out as we move forward through the spring months. Over the past couple months, I showed this growing degree day chart showing accumulated growing degree days over the first several months of the year. Once again, when talking about growing degree days, we are basically relating crop development to air temperatures. And in this case, I'm relating it to the development of winter wheat with a base temperature for growth of 32 degrees. Anytime you see an increase in the line, you're seeing growing degree days being accumulated and thus development in that particular crop and warmer temperatures in place. Anytime the line runs steady, you're thinking no growing degree days are accumulated and thus you are in more of a cooler period. So looking at the graph, you notice that we have not accumulated very many growing degree days in 2021, mostly due to that very cold February we just saw. In recent years, winter wheat and fruit crops were progressing into more advanced growth stages earlier in the year, which put the crops more at risk to frost and freezing temperatures later in the spring, which in turn, that's exactly what happened. But once again, looking at the good news, we are not near those growing degree day thresholds that were present in those previous several years. We've only accumulated over 200, just over 200 growing degree days through March 2nd this year. And looking at most of those other years, they've doubled that total by this time of the year. So all in all, this is one plus of having that cooler February. Obviously, you don't want all the impacts we saw with all the extreme weather, but the cooler temperatures will help out a bit in this fashion. So saying all this, we should see those growing degree numbers go well on the upward trajectory over the next week. I know Stu is going to talk about the short-term outlooks that show some pretty high confidence and above normal temperatures moving ahead. You're now starting to see some signs of life across the state this week. You guys might be seeing more across southern Kentucky. It's just been a little later than what we've been used to in previous years. So I know we also have wetter outlooks ahead, but I hope we do have an opportunity to dry out over the latter half of March. So with that, I wish all farmers on here or watching this webinar in the future the best of luck as you make preparations for the planting season. And with that, I'll send it back to you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Now we'll go ahead and move over to the outlooks with Stu Foster.
Yeah. Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Matt, for a very informative update on the ag side. You kind of hinted what we have ahead of us. The 7-day start out with the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast. It shows an indication of some moisture coming back into the picture here for Kentucky, but generally not a heavy amount. So the green totals are less than 1/4 of an inch. And we get into the blues there, we could be getting up 1/2 an inch, closer to an inch. I will note that within that 7-day window, all of that precipitation that is forecast for Kentucky is on the back end of that. It's really days 6 and 7. So as I looked at the 5-day outlook, and it was basically clear for Kentucky. So again, it's not a guarantee that it's going to hold off that long, but we are in a fortunate situation now where after that precipitation, we've started to dry out. We're having some sunshine, some warmer temperatures, and we expect those dry conditions to persist for a few more days here. But once we get past those few more days, we get to the 6 to 10-day outlook. And as Matt hinted there on the left side, we have a very strong trough in the western U.S. and ridge in the eastern U.S., cold in the west, warm in the east. So pretty strong confidence that we should be above normal temperature-wise over the 6 to 10-day period. With an elevated likelihood of being wetter than normal during that period, though we're kind of in between the dryness to the south and southeast coast and the wetter conditions that are more likely to impact the areas of the Midwest that are currently experiencing some dryness. We go to the 8 to 14-day outlook. We see basically the same pattern, but the models are showing a little bit more divergence. So there's not as much confidence. The 6 to 10-day outlook, there's a pretty strong agreement and as such confidence that, yeah, it's going to turn out, we think, warm and a little wetter. But the 8 to 14-day suggests that there might start to be some changing. We do still expect to see the ridging persist in the eastern part of the country, but it should be breaking down. So that is some subject to some uncertainty. Again, a fairly large area in the east, centered over the Ohio River Valley, including Kentucky, that has the highest likelihood, above 40%, of being wetter than normal for that 8 to 14-day period ahead. And then the outlook as a whole, And this was updated there at the end of February, so it's pretty new. Reflects that same pattern, warmer conditions likely in the eastern half of the country, including Kentucky. And we're in an area of, where we're likely to be wetter than normal. Again, it's not a guarantee, but just enhanced likelihood there. And that pattern on the right is very, very much consistent with a La Nina type of signal, where we tend to have wet conditions in the Ohio Valley and be dry to the south. Indeed, as we look at La Nina, we've been talking about it all winter. We've been in the midst of a La Nina. This last update comes from February. So again, the timing of these updates with our webinars are not real good. This information's a bit old, but at the time it was released, it's the most current that we have, still indicated an 82% chance of La Nina continuing through the February, March, April period, but is likely to transition back to neutral thereafter in April, May, June, or soon after that, as we get into the summer season. And again, that's a fairly common pattern. Going forward, again, it's a little bit beyond our focus of interest, but you can see in the lower right that while we're expected to go back to neutral conditions with the gray bars peaking at about 60% there later this spring, as we move to the fall, the blue bars indicate that we tend to favor a situation of La Nina returning versus the scenario where the pendulum swings and we go toward an El Nino. So La Nina for now, expected to go back to neutral. Some indication that we might go back into a La Nina pattern when we come around to the fall season. And here again is the set of graphs that look at our historical impacts. Our January, February, March section on the top row there, the second one from the left, is showing our historical precipitation. And you can see in the blue shading there, which is the La Nina years, that we have had some extremely wet La Nina years with 20 inches or more of precipitation. If you can remember back to the first maps that we showed of precipitation totals over the last 90 days, the wettest areas were in the high teens there, 16, 17, 18, 19 inches. So, and again, that wasn't statewide, but those were the wettest areas. So it does show up that this year, especially with the recent precipitation event, has been above normal, consistent with a La Nina signal. It took a while to get there, but we have had wetter than normal conditions. But having said that, we have seen years where it was much, much wetter than this year, and this year's been rough enough with the floods. Going forward, the February, March, April period, again, you can see that there have been many years where we have been extremely wet during that period. And the way the outlook is now, it suggests that we may very well be above that median level in the brighter blue bar that's around 11 or 12 inches and favoring something a bit higher there into the mid-teens or higher. So that would be consistent with the La Nina type of pattern, but as we've talked about, it's not guaranteed by any means. And for this graph, the February, March, April, the temperature signal is not particularly strong here. And going forward, you can see March, April, May actually tend to be a little bit cooler on average for a La Nina. But right now we're looking at the expectation of warmer than normal temperatures. Then the seasonal outlook, again, still reflecting a La Nina signal there, warmer weather expected into the south, a greater likelihood of equal chances or below normal conditions to the north and northwest. then that area of elevated likelihoods of wetter conditions reaching down from the Great Lakes into the Ohio River Valley, with drier conditions expected in the western U.S., where we currently have widespread drought conditions, and drier conditions anticipated along the southern Gulf Coast, which is very much consistent with the La Nina signal. Flooding outlook, again, we're just coming out of the flood event, and so we still have a number of stages that are in the square bars. So it's a 70% chance of exceedance. Whoops, we got, go ahead to the next slide there, Megan. Not sure what happened there. So we've got a lot of squares there, and the red indicating moderate flooding, the magenta major flooding. So this is our product out of the National Weather Service Ohio River Forecast Center up at Wilmington, Ohio. And again, just a confirmation of what we're seeing. So this is, again, the next 10-day potential. So we're seeing things drop down a little bit, but we've got the likelihood of above normal precip in the outlooks there ahead of us. And then the seasonal flood risk outlook with a 25% or more chance of flooding. Again, a lot of reds and purples and such, and that's reflecting that the conditions that we're already experiencing. And we have the setup with the very wet soils and high stream flows that if we do get above normal precipitation, we could be right back into a flooding situation without too much precipitation maybe to happen. Ohio River Forecast Center also indicates over the next 2 weeks, looking at stream flows on the Ohio River. So we're looking at the full length of the basin, starting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania there, and coming down through Huntington, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Louisville, that we're expected to run at somewhere 150 to 200% of normal stream flow. So, you know, you've got a large river, it will take a while for the Ohio River to drop back down to more normal stream flows, and with expectation of more precipitation, that period of high flows may be prolonged. And then finally, some good news, the wildfire potential is below normal for our region, and as such likely to stay that way now for the month of March. And probably a little bit beyond that. We'll see how they update this next month. So to summarize, I've had a lot going on. Very cold weather, a couple major winter storms, and as Matt mentioned, really at least 3 events here in the state, depending on where you were. Different areas got different types of precipitation, different amounts. Then we transitioned back to seasonal temperatures, or even a little bit above normal, with a heavy rainfall event over the past weekend, with all the flooding associated with that. So not surprising, the soil moisture, groundwater, stream flows are all elevated. And when we combine that with an enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation going forward, that indicates an increased risk of flooding as we looked through the month of March. So we have this drying out period that's going on right now. We need to enjoy that, and that's providing some much needed relief and benefit for farmers too, and opportunity to clean up here a little bit before we go back to what may be a wetter and warmer climate here over the next few weeks. And La Nina conditions expected to persist through the winter, likely to go back to neutral conditions later this spring or summer. So that's kind of concludes a summary of a very busy period. So Megan, I will send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Stu and Matt. You did a great job on presenting all of that information with as much as there was to bring to the table. So in the chat, Lyndall messaged me and wanted to ask a question about the storm reports page. I'm going to go back there real quick just so it is on the page. So there was a crazy amount of storm reports that were listed out for this period. So there were some that got truncated from the list. And he mentioned that Boyd County had severe flooding, 2 ice events and so forth, and it's minimized here. So I just wanted to bring that to the focus that this is probably not a full capture of how bad everything was, but that it still obviously shows that there was widespread event across the entire state.
Yeah, just to highlight that, I think the report or table that we scraped off of actual storm reports that came in to the various National Weather Service offices for that 30-day period had over 1,000 lines of reports. So
Yeah.
And that kind of confirms that there was just no way that we could capture all of that in the map or even in our summary. And it was kind of mentioned going along, we really could have done an entire webinar just talking about impacts of the weather going forward. And that's actually something that we probably want to look into. It's to some extent, it's a little bit beyond the scope of what we have tried to do with this series, but I think this recent event highlights the need for it for us to try to reach out and see if we can strengthen our communication and engagement with the emergency management FEMA side of things to try to capture a little bit more detail on some of these impacts. So that'll be a fairly major undertaking, but and it wouldn't happen in a period of a month, but it's something we can take a look at strategically and see whether there might be a way that we can enhance the content and presentation of some of these impacts.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation, Lyndall, or did we cover what your concerns were?
No, you're good. Thank
All
you.
right, awesome. All right, well, I'll go back to the summary slide, and if anybody has any other questions, feel free to either type it in the chat box or you can unmute and say what you're wanting to ask. All right, if there are no questions, we will go ahead and conclude. Thanks so much for being here. Our next regularly scheduled webinar will be Thursday, April 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's after the time change, so hopefully everybody will be changed over by then, but just make sure you note that on your calendar. Here are the contacts for feedback if you have any, and they will go out with the email following this this presentation. Here are the links for the Hydrologic Impact Reporter and Story Map. And if you have any questions that you think of after we conclude, feel free to email. Stu Foster probably would be your best contact. So thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to talking to you next month.